If you stand on the walls of the old city of Jerusalem and look east towards the Mount of Olives, your eye is immediately drawn to one building. It isn't a mosque, it isn't a synagogue. It is a massive, cascading structure of white limestone and teak wood, featuring a row of elegant arches that look like a Roman aqueduct. It sits on the strategic heights of Mount Scopus, dominating the skyline. To the tourist, it is an architectural masterpiece. It offers arguably the best view in the entire Middle East, but to the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in the 1980s, this wasn't a building. It was a Death Star. This is the Brigham Young University, BYU, Jerusalem Center. It is the Middle Eastern campus for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And for about 5 years, the construction of this building almost tore the Israeli government apart. There were mass protests in the streets. There were death threats. There were curses placed by Kabbalistic rabbis. The Israeli government nearly collapsed over the question of whether to let 200 American college students study Hebrew +1. Why? Because in the eyes of the religious Jewish establishment, the Mormons weren't just building a university, they were building a fortress of conversion. They feared this building was the launchpad for a spiritual crusade to steal the souls of Jewish children. +1. Welcome back. Today, we are looking at the Mormon fortress. We are going to explore how a university with a nice view sparked a culture war, and why the students inside are legally forbidden from talking about religion. To understand the panic, you have to understand the reputation of the LDS Church. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is famous for one thing above all else: missionary work. We have all seen the pairs of young men in white shirts and ties, riding bicycles, knocking on doors. It is the core DNA of their faith. So, when the LDS Church announced in the late 1970s that they wanted to build a massive center in Jerusalem, the alarm bells in the ultra-Orthodox Haredi community didn't just ring, they exploded. For the Haredim, missionary activity is not a nuisance. It is a spiritual holocaust. They view Jewish history as a struggle for survival. After losing 6 million Jews to the Nazis' physical destruction, they viewed losing Jews to conversion as spiritual destruction. +1. They looked at the blueprints for the BYU Center and saw a Trojan horse. They asked, why does a university need to be this big? Why does it need to be on Mount Scopus, the most strategic military high ground in the city? Why do they need 125,000 square feet for just a few hundred students? The conspiracy theories flew. Some rabbis claimed the center would have underground tunnels to kidnap children. Others claimed the arches were actually antennas to broadcast Mormon propaganda into Jewish homes. It sounds absurd now, but the fear was genuine. They believed that once the Mormon fortress was finished, thousands of missionaries would flood the streets of Jerusalem, armed with Hebrew books of Mormon, and the Jewish character of the state would be erased. The man standing in the middle of this firestorm was the legendary mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek. Kollek was a secular pragmatist. He wanted Jerusalem to be a cosmopolitan, world-class city. He wanted foreign investment. He argued that if Jerusalem is a holy city for all, then the Mormons have a right to be there, just like the Catholics, the Muslims, and the Lutherans. He pushed the project through. He gave the Mormons the land lease. The Haredim declared war on Kollek. They staged massive protests. Tens of thousands of black-hatted demonstrators filled the streets, chanting, "Jerusalem is not for sale," and holding signs depicting the BYU Center as a spiritual cancer. The rhetoric got dark. Rabbi Yitzhak Kaduri, one of the most famous mystics and Kabbalists in Israel, reportedly hinted that the construction of the center was linked to spiritual when a prominent Hasidic leader, the Rebbe of Ger, fell ill. His followers blamed the impurity radiating from the Mormon construction site. The pressure on the Israeli government was immense. The Haredi parties in the Knesset parliament threatened to bring down the coalition government if the construction wasn't stopped. It turned into a diplomatic nightmare. The United States government got involved. 154 members of the US Congress signed a letter to the Israeli Prime Minister, effectively saying, "If you stop this building because of religious discrimination, American funding for Israel might be at risk." Israel was stuck. They couldn't anger their own religious voters, but they couldn't anger their biggest ally. So, how do they solve it? They drafted one of the most unique legal contracts in the history of religion. In August 1985, to save the project, the LDS Church signed a binding non-proselytizing agreement. This wasn't just a handshake. It was a formal undertaking given to the Israeli government. In this document, the church promised that 1. They would not engage in any missionary activity in Israel. 2. No student, faculty member, or employee would attempt to convert a Jew. 3. They would not distribute literature. 4. They would not even answer questions about their faith if the intent was conversion. Think about how wild this is. A church that requires all its young men to serve 2-year proselytizing missions agreed to build its most expensive outpost in the world and promised to keep its mouth shut. It was a theological ceasefire. The Mormons traded their Great Commission, the command to preach to all nations, for a building permit. The Haredim were skeptical. They didn't trust the signature. They set up a watchdog committee to spy on the students. They warned that if a single Mormon was caught preaching, they would storm the building. The center finally opened in 1988, and the rules inside are incredibly stricter than any other BYU campus. I have spoken to students who studied there. They describe a fishbowl existence. They are told during orientation, if you try to convert someone, you will be on the next plane home within 24 hours. They are not allowed to give a Book of Mormon to an Israeli, even if the Israeli asks for one. They have to be careful about singing hymns in public places. The building itself reflects this isolation. It is designed to be self-contained. It has its own cafeteria, its own gym, its own chapel, and its own dorms. The students live in a literal bubble of American culture on top of a Palestinian hill. But here is the irony. The fortress worked, but not in the way the rabbis feared. Instead of a base for invasion, it became a base for cultural diplomacy. The center hosts high-quality classical music concerts every Sunday evening. These concerts are free and open to the public. +1. Who comes to these concerts? Secular Israelis, music lovers. They come for the jazz, the organ music, and the stunning view of the sunset over the Dome of the Rock. The Mormons realized that if they couldn't win converts with theology, they would win friends. With architecture and acoustics, they shifted their strategy from conversion to presence. They just want to be in Jerusalem, to connect their students to the Bible lands, and to be seen as a legitimate global faith. Why was it so important for them to stay? Why agree to such harsh terms? Because of a prophecy. In 1841, an early Mormon apostle named Orson Hyde climbed the Mount of Olives, just a few hundred yards from where the center stands today. He built a small altar and dedicated the land of Jerusalem for the return of the Jewish people. This is a crucial point. Mormons are Christian Zionists, but with a twist. They believe they are from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, part of the house of Israel. They view the Jews as their cousins, Judah. They believe the return of the Jews to Israel is a necessary precursor to the second coming. So, for the LDS Church, having a footprint on the Mount of Olives isn't just about study abroad. It is about fulfilling Orson Hyde's prayer. It is about physically staking a claim to their heritage as the restored house of Israel. They are willing to endure the silence, the restrictions, and the suspicion just to keep that foot in the door. Today, the controversy has mostly faded. The Haredim have moved on to other battles, like the draft or Sabbath laws. The BYU Center has become an accepted part of the Jerusalem skyline. But the Mormon fortress remains a fascinating anomaly. It is a missionary training center that forbids missionary work. It is a Christian university that is more pro-Israel than many Jewish organizations. And it is a place where 200 young Americans live in a golden cage, looking out at a city they love, but are legally forbidden from fully engaging with. It stands as a monument to the complexity of Jerusalem, a city where you can buy land, but you can't always buy trust, and where sometimes the only way to speak is to promise to remain silent. If you enjoyed this look into the strange world of diplomatic theology, hit that subscribe button. Next time, we are going to investigate the Australian who burned Alexa, a true crime story that changed the Middle East forever. You won't believe how much damage one man with a delusion can do. Thanks for watching.